I think traders are going to be interested. So we're completing the testing of Coinbase integration. We're very excited about it. It's going to add a new dimension.
Warning. The political trade features probabilities and perspectives about politicians, political parties, political outcomes, and political wagering. The political trade is rated NSFP, not safe for partisans.
The number one biggest game is predicting number famous like a race at the top because they want to be boss. They don't care who they step on as long as they get along. Politicians in my eyes.
Well, welcome back to The Political Trade, the podcast for people with a passion for politics, probability, and profits. I'm Jeff Joseph, editorial director of Luckbox magazine, hosting the political podcast where conservatives and liberals, Republicans and Democrats, partisans and wingnuts all come together to make money betting on politics by trading in the prediction markets at PredictIt.org, the stock market for politics that trades 24/7. We've got a great show ahead. Of particular interest to PredictIt traders. Based in New York, John Phillips, the CEO of Aristotle, the company which runs the PredictIt platform, will be joining us. Up ahead, John will be answering some of the most asked questions about PredictIt and political prediction markets in general, including questions sent to us by listeners and previous guests. And in our final segment, we'll be asking John for his perspectives on some of the most actively traded PredictIt markets. So to get the most out of this podcast, you should open up PredictIt.org, click on the Markets tab, which is top left, follow along, and leave your political ideologies at the door. As always, I'm joined by Mike Reddy. Mike is an editor at Luckbox magazine, a new prediction market trader, and the producer of The Political Trade. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing well, Jeff. I tell you, I know our hands have been a little tied in the past week closing on the last issue of Luckbox, but I still found a little bit of time to make a few trades here and there. One of the things I was really sort of banking on, there was some speculation in the comment section of the Iowa caucus market. And with speculation comes volatility. So thinking back to what Derek Phillips told us in episode 5, I was taking advantage of a little bit of penny flipping. Although I was probably the only person who got screwed, so to speak, in the Iowa caucus market, because right after I flipped for a penny, the market finally resolved. And so I lost out quite a bit. But I did make about maybe $3 or $4 on that penny flip. So not a total loss.
As we know, that market was open for a long time, but somebody had to do the last sprint on that trade. So that was you. And so you get the benefit of the last tick. Well, not only do we have many questions about the PredictIt platform in terms of pulling back the curtain and taking a look inside and how it runs and learning that directly from John Phillips, but I'm particularly fascinated by a specific story from John's past. So let's bring him on. John, are you with us?
I am. Hey, guys.
Well, hey, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
Well, you have to know what I'm referring to, which we haven't spoken about offline to date. Yet, aside from being the CEO of a DC-based political technology firm, well, a nonpartisan political technology firm, I should probably mention, you run the most actively traded prediction market in the country with Aristotle. And you have an interesting backstory that I want to get right into. So I'm going to start with this because I'm fascinated by it. Let's go back to the mid-70s. You were an undergrad at Berkeley, and then you transferred over to Princeton. And you had an interesting year, your junior year. But let's back up a little bit. What was the transition from Berkeley to Princeton based on?
You know, that does go back a ways, but I don't get asked to talk about this too often, but I'm happy to. I was a physics major at Berkeley in my second year, and was interested in pursuing an area of the discipline that the right professor for me was at Princeton. And so I asked and was permitted to transfer in. Princeton doesn't take too many transfer students. I don't think they take any transfer students anymore, but at the time it was unusual. So I got in there as a sophomore, junior, and as soon as I got there, I realized that was the place for me.
Well, it also was the basis of some early celebrity for you. So tell us about February 1977. You developed an A-bomb, and and you developed an atomic bomb, and so much so that it became a kind of a media sensation, right? There was a Rolling Stone 1980 article written about you, which I've read. You were on To Tell the Truth, which is a funny thing because, first of all, it shows our age. I know I'm in your bracket, and I know, to tell the truth, and that means you met Kitty Carlisle. Is that even possible?
Oh yeah, that was terrific. Yeah, that was one of the.
How about it?
Well, I mean, I was so at Princeton. They have a thing called a junior thesis, and then your senior thesis. And the junior thesis is generally, each term. So you got one in the fall and one in the spring. You're supposed to pick a topic and really do a deep dive, and then your senior thesis sometimes builds on that. So this was my junior thesis, and I was in a class taught by two professors that I admired very much but didn't know, Hal Fiveson and Freeman Dyson. Now I knew them by reputation, and of course Freeman Dyson, who just passed away. I'm sorry to say, he was this eminent theoretical physicist. The class, however, was on the subject of nuclear proliferation, and I became intrigued at the possibility and the threat that if a terrorist group or criminal organization or a third world country could get their hands on the raw material, the ingredients for the plutonium or the enriched uranium needed to fashion an atomic bomb, that they might actually be able to pull it off. Up to that point, Jeff, the theory was that you would need another Los Alamos project, billions of dollars and thousands of scientists to be able to build an atomic bomb. And therefore, there wasn't a lot of attention paid to safeguarding the raw ingredients to build one, because it was thought to be out of the reach of terrorists or criminals or less developed countries. I questioned that. And Dyson agreed to be my thesis advisor, and I was going to try to design an atomic bomb from publicly available documents. 3 months later, when I turned in the paper, I went back. I didn't know if I'd succeeded or not, and I went back to pick up the paper from the physics department, and it wasn't there in where all the other graded papers were. And I thought, oh well, that's the end of my career at Princeton. And the departmental secretary asked me, what I was looking for. I said, I'm here to pick up my graded paper. And she said, you can't, you're the kid that did the atomic bomb. It's been classified. That was the first inkling I had that I'd come close. And I became more interested than ever in the subject of proliferation. But frankly, the physics department had shuffled me off to a NASA facility to work for the summer. And I didn't think much of it. There was a little bit of publicity on campus. But when I returned in the fall, I had moved into my dorm and was preparing to commence my second junior year. And somebody called the dorm and asked to speak with the kid who designed the atomic bomb. I wasn't actually in the dorm at the time. One of my roommates took the call. And the person on the other end of the line had a sort of heavy foreign accent. And my roommate thought it was a practical joke being played by somebody down the hall. It turned out, as you can imagine, not to be. It was actually a representative of the Pakistani government, according to the FBI. They caught the guy, kicked him out of the country. Senator Proxmire gave a speech on the floor of the Senate calling for the cancellation of the sale of a plutonium reprocessing facility, which France was proceeding with. They were preparing to sell it to Pakistan. And as a result, there was a ton of publicity and attention. And as a small result of that incident, the French canceled the sale of the plutonium reprocessing facility to Pakistan. And so that was my introduction to politics and atomic bombs.
So in your teens at Princeton, you developed an A-bomb, end up with an article in the Rolling Stone and on television, on network television, and a story by Walter Cronkite, I understand as well, and mentioned on the Senate floor. That was the basis of a transition into politics. I read the Rolling Stone article, and it seems as though you were taking a very progressive, activist, anti-nuclear proliferation stance at that point, and used that as a platform to move into politics. You you actually ran for the U.S. House of Representatives seat for the 4th District in Connecticut. Is that right? At the age of 24?
That's right. That's right. I became really interested more interested in the issue in politics, certainly, and in the issue of proliferation, but other things as well. I had close friends from school who came to the Connecticut and helped me run a political campaign. We won the primary, astonished everybody, including ourselves. We won the Democratic primary and then lost the general election.
You must have just barely been of age. Is that right?
I was actually underage, but I would have turned 25, which was the minimum age, right at the time of the election. So I could be sworn in if I. And I, my interest in politics sort of morphed at that point from the policy, which I cared a lot about, but I became more interested in the practical expression of the democratic process. How you run for office, how you get your messages to the voters, how you organize your district. And as a result of that, I recruited my little brother, who was an engineering major at MIT, to come help me with the campaign. And Dean designed a software program, the first ever software program. It ran on an Apple II computer, and it was the first ever software program for political campaign management. And we dubbed it Campaign Manager. And after the election, in spite of the fact that we lost the election, we had candidates, Republicans and Democrats, who called us up and said, "Hey, can we get a copy of that computer program you wrote?" And in those days, you didn't really think about selling programs like that. You just sort of wrote them and then gave them away and made copies for your friends. Well, in this case, people were actually willing to pay us for it. And that's how Aristotle, the company, the political technology company, nonpartisan, as you pointed out, that's how the company was started. It was people calling us or writing to us and saying, "Hey, can we get a copy of that program you used in your campaign in Connecticut?" And so that's where we started.
And that would be back in the early 80s.
It was in 80 and 82. And we started the company in 83. We had the impetus was as much to put food on the table as to retire it wasn't very much, but it seemed like a big campaign debt at the time. It was, $25,000 or $30,000, which seemed like a lot of money. But the program started to sell. In fact, it was quite popular. And when candidates would give us a shout out when they would use our program and win, that's how we marketed the software to Republicans and the Democrats and the independents. And so this was the first political technology company ever created, and it was built on the basis of a software program that the Dean wrote during the election campaign.
And how's the company evolved today? What do you look like in terms of employees and
it's
different campaign platforms?
It's just a great company. It's about 150 employees. We're headquartered in Washington, D.C. We have employees around the country and in some foreign countries. And we are the leading nonpartisan provider of political technology to anyone who is seeking to influence decisions made by voters at the ballot box. So if you have, whether you're running a referendum or for a local issue, or you're running for president, you're often using Aristotle technology to raise money, to comply with the disclosure laws, to contact voters, to do all the things that campaigns need to do in the course of the campaign.
That's a fun story as to how that evolved from Princeton's dorm into a political technology company employing over 150 people. Right.
Yeah.
So how did Victoria University's initiative, which is now PredictIt, how did Aristotle and Victoria get together?
This is great. So public opinion polling is useful for certain things. If you really want to try to get inside the head of the voter and find out why they think the way they do, why they're going to act the way they do, focus groups are really pretty effective. They're expensive, but they allow you to drill down on this sort of thing. If you want to understand if the election were held today, for whom would you vote? Public opinion polling is pretty effective, although it's expensive, and it also has become much more difficult with the difficulty of picking random samples who will actually, of people who are registered to vote, who are in the district, who are willing to talk to you long enough for you to complete a 20 or a 30-minute questionnaire. So public opinion polling was at a point where it was becoming less useful for making the day-to-day decisions in a political campaign. Because after all, you don't really care about what somebody's going to support, who's going to support who 6 months or 8 months away from the election. A poll now is not really relevant to what's going to happen on election day. So you really need something that's much less expensive, much more immediate, and is constantly updated. And that's how we came to talk to Victoria University of Wellington, New Zealand. They had been running what's called a prediction market called iPredict for many years, a very good one. But they were unable to really grow it outside of New Zealand and a couple of other countries nearby. They were really they pioneered this form of prediction market, and we approached them and said, look, we think there might be an opportunity here to take what you've done, improve upon it, and introduce it to the U.S. market. And that's what we did. We struck a deal with Victoria, and we started building the trade engine. We got regulatory approval in the United States to open it with Victoria, and that's how PredictIt was born.
And was that back in 2014, around there? Or?
Yes, we started at the beginning of 2014. It took about 6 or 7 months to work out the kinks and get the trade engine working. The trade engine, of course, is a software that manages all these transactions. And then structured it like a stock market, a $1 winner-take-all contract. We introduced it just days before the November 2014 election. It was slow going at first because not many people knew about it. But as word circulated, more and more people signed up, and the market itself proved to have some value as a prediction engine. It's the theory behind PredictIt markets that you guys are familiar with, which is that markets have, through their price discovery, have the ability to assimilate millions or billions of pieces of information from thousands, sometimes tens of thousands of people, sometimes millions of people. And markets are able, therefore, to collect information and spot directions that spot what's going to happen in the future. And so the prediction markets are designed for that.
Some of those underpinnings, the research behind prediction markets, whether it be Justin Walfer's research that more or less validated the predictive accuracy of the binary pricing model, the binary options pricing model, in terms of that pricing replicating the percentage of the outcomes actually occurring, or whether it be the efficient capital market hypothesis, which really goes back to Bachelier in the 1900s, introducing the random walk, and then through Mandelbrot and Samuelson in the 60s, and then Fama in the 70s. Are those the underpinnings that you still use and rely on today for the development of the market?
Yeah, I mean, prediction markets are not new, as you point out. People have been fascinated as to why they are as accurate as they are. There was an attempt at a prediction market called InTrade, which took place in the 2000s. And InTrade was an interesting saga. And the guy who founded it, who I never met, John Delaney, was sort of the Pied Piper of InTrade and prediction markets for a considerable period of time. He had some people that he worked closely with that I do know, and they were as much involved in the practical creation of these and operation of these prediction markets as anybody. But you're quite right. There's a theoretical underpinning to prediction markets and theories on markets in general as to why they're so accurate.
Well, we want to take just a quick break and be right back in a moment to really kind of peel back the onion and look inside PredictIt and ask you some of the questions that are frequently asked by listeners to this show and others who have sent in some questions for you. But we'll be right back after a short break. But first,
Want a little more luck in your life? Get Luckbox, the control freak's guide to life, money, and probability. Named the best new magazine of 2019. Luckbox is a must-read for side hustlers, gamblers, entrepreneurs, and active investors. Each issue features best bets from prediction market experts, as well as timely sports wagering, stocks, options, futures, and cryptocurrency trading ideas. You can buy Luckbox on newsstands, but with this special offer, listeners of the Political Trade can receive a 10-issue digital subscription absolutely free. Just visit getluckbox.com to receive the award-winning magazine right in your inbox. Don't rely on luck. Get Luckbox for free today. Learn more at getluckbox.com.
So, welcome back to this special episode of The Political Trade with John Phillips, the CEO of the nonpartisan political technology firm Aristotle, which runs the PredictIt platform. We asked listeners to send in some questions that you might have for PredictIt, and you delivered. So, in this segment, we hope to pull back the PredictIt curtain a little bit, learn a little bit more about the platform from the guy who's responsible for it. But before we do that, I want to step back a second. We were talking about prediction markets and kind of the basis for them and their relative value as opposed to the polling markets. So I know that's become a little bit more of a visible, let's call it controversy as of late, where different people are weighing in on the relative merit and accuracy of polling markets versus prediction markets. Clearly, there's an obvious answer in that there's a value and need for both, and they each have their place. But I was wondering if you can add to that.
Sure. I mean, if I'm running a political campaign, I want to have the best pollster with the most accurate questions at the lowest cost possible polling for me every day. But I'm not going to ask the pollster to waste campaign resources on telling me who's going to win at the election we're held today. The horse race element of polling is overdone by the media. It's interesting, it's fun, but it really doesn't tell you anything about who's going to win the election in November. So if I'm running a campaign, I'm interested in polling for another reason, not because it's going to predict the future, but rather it's going to give me insights into why people think the way they do. Why are you supporting this candidate? What do you think of his issue? Do you have any questions about his integrity or his stand on issues? That's the kind of thing that I want my pollster to tell me about and help me devise a strategy. Prediction markets do something completely different. They don't ask people what you want to have happen, who you're going to support. That's not what prediction markets do. They're no good at it. What prediction markets do is they will query people and allow them to put money where their mouth is, put a little skin in the game as to what they, rather than what they want to have happen, it's what they think is going to happen. Because that's how you make money in a prediction market. You guess correctly the outcome of an event and you're ahead of the rest of the crowd. And so prediction markets are very, very useful for other types of data gathering and analysis and informing a strategy. Markets are just so efficient at distilling lots of pieces of information into prices, and prices reflect odds that something's going to happen.
And that is the Hayek premise, the Hayek hypothesis that that's led to the use of crowdsourced data aggregation for predictive modeling and algorithms. I mean, it's all based on that. So who is using the data? We all understand that PredictIt operates under an exemptive relief letter offered by the CFTC because the data is being used for academic purposes. Can you tell us a little bit more about how it's being used and by whom?
Sure. Yeah, this is one of the most interesting aspects to me of the story of PredictIt so far. So we started with Victoria University and Aristotle doing the back office, the compliance, the processing of funds, that sort of stuff, and building the trade engine, maintaining the trade engine. But the rationale for doing this was there was significant academic interest in, if markets are able to price to predict the price of oil or pork bellies or corn 6 months into the future, or even weather, for instance, hurricane landfall options, then might they also be used to predict or to gain insights into other types of events, in particular political and economic events? And there are many, many researchers studying exactly that question. Why are markets so effective? How effective are they? When are they fooled? What makes a super forecaster tick? How do you spot super forecasters, people who consistently get it right before the rest of the crowd? And remember, you don't have to be right 100% of the time. You just got to be right a little bit more than everybody else in order to be able to spot these trends. So we have, from the one university, we've expanded. There are now over 200 researchers. These are professors and researchers and data scientists and the like. The 200 researchers at 85 academic institutions in the United States and abroad. And these are good ones. These are in the economics department, the political science, or the mathematics, or the marketing department. These are people who have dedicated a significant amount of time to analyzing the anonymized data that PredictIt has spun off as to how accurate these markets are and when they're accurate and why are they so accurate.
So what does the audience look like? What can you tell us about the audience makeup and demographic of the registered users? I think at last count, where are you in terms of registered users to the platform?
Okay, sure. We have 220,000 registered users, a little over 100,000 of whom have funded their accounts. The age range, it's a broad age range. You have to be over 18, but the age range is generally people in their late 20s, 30s, and 40s, although there are people older than that and younger than that. It's skewed male. One of the interesting things about the composition is it's almost exactly a pattern, maps the pattern of party affiliation in the United States. So third Republican, third Democrat, third unaffiliated, approximately. It's geographically distributed, but there are more than a fair share of day traders by profession, people who work on Wall Street or are involved in markets. And other popular zip codes are Washington D.C. and then state capitals and around the country.
And the account sizes range from, there's no minimum, right? The smallest accounts are opening at $10.
$10, and the average first-time deposit's about $200.
Well, as you know, we've had many of your super forecasters and super traders on the political trade.
Yeah.
These are they've told us their incomes there are a number of six-figure income earners where trading on the PredictIt platform is their only profession. And there are many part-time traders who are in the 50,000 plus category. They've all been on our show, sharing some of their ideas and trading wisdom with us. And then, of course, you'd have a large universe of traders who have just doing this as a hobby, as perhaps a little side hustle. But we're fascinated by those traders who have made this a full-time avocation or are intent on taking $50,000 a year of income out of this market each year, and we've learned a lot from them. It's there's certainly an ecosystem of traders, and they're very willing to share their expertise, which reminds us a lot of the capital markets as well, where you have some traders that are willing to share ideas, not for a fee, but just to educate other traders. And I think there's a lot to be said for the ecosystem that exists among these traders right now.
Yeah, I mean, if you've seen the comments, for instance, we as a sort of
that's a whole other story. The comment boards are a complete other mess. So let's talk about them for a moment, just because you bring them up.
Sure.
So there are comment boards in all the different markets, and there's all sorts of conversations going on those boards. And we've spoken to many of the super traders who say they game the comment boards. Some of them use it for indications as to where they think market sentiment is. Others use it completely for trying to send people off in the wrong direction. And they're pretty open about that. And understandably, because, and we just know from being publishers ourselves, it is impossible to supervise digital environments like comment boards and chat rooms. And sometimes in the same way you let the market decide on PredictIt, you should just let that market be, which is clearly the business decision you've made, is let people make their comments and the market will sort out the signal from the noise. Was there ever any interest in trying to regulate the comment board activity, or do you just like to let it be what it is?
There's certain futility to trying to regulate what people are going to say on a comment board. Doesn't matter, where the comment board is located. And when you have 1,250,000 comments, this cycle alone on the Democratic nominee It's quite a chore. There are occasions when there is particularly either construed to be dangerous or highly offensive language that we will step in, but the comment boards are, there are people doing all, messaging all kinds of different ways. People should focus on what they know, and part of the beauty of PredictIt is that it's an antidote for fake news. In other words, if people are making their market decisions, their buying decisions based on fake information, fake news, they're going to lose their money. And so there is a natural indication that people who can discount a lot of the noise and a lot of the other stuff that goes on out there, and I'm not just talking on the comment boards, I'm talking in the media in general. And if you just discount that and focus on what you really know to be the truth, and you focus on reputable, sources and reputable brands, you're less likely to make a decision based on incorrect information.
Well, next up, John, another question that's frequent among the active traders in the PredictIt platform is how new markets are determined. A lot of people have opinions. They'd like to see something traded, or a market presented in a specific manner. So can you tell us a little bit about that process? How are new markets developed? How are they researched and ultimately selected?
Sure. That's something where if you had asked me 5 years ago when we were starting this, I wouldn't have even thought it would take much effort, but it actually is an intense focus of ours in terms of bringing up new markets that people are going to be interested in investing in. Certain characteristics make for a good market. And many of the suggestions for new markets come from our traders. So they will email us, or there's an email, markets@predictit.org, that traders can use to make new market suggestions, or continuations of existing markets. And we get a good number of suggestions for new markets from there. I think it's easy to underestimate that we've learned the hard way is, the outcome has to be absolutely binary. If it's not a binary outcome, the way the question is phrased, it's not going to make people happy, and it's hard to, you need a binary outcome, and you need a settlement authority. You need something you can turn to say, when this happens, this will be reflected in the published record, or in the official statement, or in the economic data that's released on such and such a date. So good new markets are those that are binary in nature, and where there's a settlement authority. And lastly, but not least, it's got to be something people are interested in weighing in on. If it's volatile, in other words, it'll go up and down, or it may look one way, then it goes another way, that makes for even more involved trader focus.
That raises a question from Scott Supak, who has been a frequent guest of ours and one of your very, very active traders. And Scott, we know Scott's particularly interested in the climate markets and climate change and the temperature markets. And he asked specifically if those are markets that we should expect to see more frequently going forward.
Sure. So there are, the climate change markets are interesting. It has to fit within the four corners of the regulatory authority that monitors this. And we would like to see more markets up that have to do with political events, or that touch on the political process. And climate markets are an example of one that I think personally there's great potential, but it has to be okayed.
Jason Pipkin, also an active trader, wanted to just send a note of thanks. He was really encouraged by a recent post that was put up on PredictIt asking for some input, and that was soliciting input from the active traders. And he was also pleased that there was a request for feedback on proposed brackets for an electoral vote margin market. He thought that was a really welcome thing, to get that feedback from some of the active traders.
Right. Yeah. I mean, our most active traders, you mentioned two of them, are help by giving us their input. And I would invite anybody that thinks that there's a better way to do what we're doing, or we should be covering areas or putting up markets. We try to put up the markets quickly in response to events, and there's a process we have where it has to be approved by the university. A lot of the suggestions we get are from the universities and the academics, but a lot are also from traders. But once those suggestions from markets come in, we have a process that we have streamlined, where we get the question approved. If it fits within the criteria, we'll try to put it up. We spend some time drafting the rule, trying to make sure that the rule is bulletproof, and then we put the question up as quickly as we can.
Well, at this point, going into the general election, we expect trading volume will increase. The amount of new registered traders coming onto the site will increase dramatically as well. What is your advice to new traders, people coming to the PredictIt platform for the first time?
Start with a small investment and just monitor your own behavior, because it's fascinating. Once you have a little bit of an investment in one of these political outcomes, it's amazing how your mind starts to focus on any information that might affect the value of that investment. That's not to say you need to always be making $5 or $10 or $15 trades. There's a lot of fun in trades that are bigger than that. And then I'd say, trader psychology is so interesting. There's a long shot bias, which is very interesting. People like the odds of long shots, and the long shots are long shots for a reason.
One last thing, I understand you're breaking some news with us today. We asked you offline if there was anything new that traders should be looking forward to, and you said you had some news that you're going to share with us. So what can you tell us?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think traders are going to be interested. So we're completing the testing of Coinbase integration, and that's going to allow traders to use USD coin, that is a dollar-denominated stable coin. So we've wanted to do that for a while. The testing has been underway, but we're testing this and allowing some of our team and traders to test it, and we expect that to be more readily available beginning of next month. But we're very excited about it. It's going to add a new dimension.
Coinbase would be a fantastic partner. I think what's impressive about Coinbase is when the markets were collapsing during the 30% fall off that they experienced over the last several weeks, we saw discount brokerage firms that were app based like Robinhood actually be out of business for 3 days during the busiest trading days of the decade, and where people could not get into their accounts and make a transaction. But during those same days, particularly during a Bitcoin sell-off that corresponded to the broader market sell-off, Coinbase actually processed 2 billion trades in one day successfully, which was an incredible statement of their infrastructure, and probably why Brian Armstrong, 37-year-old CEO, just ended up on the youngest billionaires list at Forbes. Coinbase is just an incredible platform for crypto trading, and sounds like a great partner. So I'll look forward to see how that plays out. Well, yeah. So congratulations on that news. And we're actually going to take a quick break right now, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about some of the highest trading volume markets that are on everybody's minds. We'll be right back. And we're back with John Phillips, CEO of Aristotle. Now, John, we know you can't trade on PredictIt. We would expect that you are prohibited from trading. Are the employees as well?
Yes, regrettably.
They are. All right. So we won't be asking you. Typically, at this point in our episodes, we do a segment on trade recommendations, and that means listeners will not be hearing the familiar bell that designates a trade recommendation, because you also run a nonpartisan political technology company, and I don't think you're probably going to go down that route with us. But there are some markets that you mentioned that were of interest to you that you wanted to share some perspective on. I know the European leader market was one of them, which is specifically which one of these 5 European leaders will leave office next. It's a market that some friends of yours, the guys from Hard Factor, because they're such good advocates of the PredictIt platform. They were on a recent episode with us, and Hard Factor Mark actually had a specific recommendation in this market. He really feels as though Conti and Johnson were the bets that he wanted to place. But what are your thoughts on that market?
Well, so first of all, I love those Hard Factor guys.
They're awesome, by the way. We had so much fun with them.
They have made an art form of this. Let me just say, they have taken PredictIt to a whole new dimension. Anybody who's not familiar with Hard Factor, you definitely have to listen into them. They're on Barstool Network, but they're great, and it's almost like therapy Jeff, listening to those guys. They analyze and talk about the current political situation with a sense of humor, but also how to make money from it on PredictIt, and it's highly entertaining.
Yeah, we had them on, and we're also featuring them in the next issue of Luckbox. We're doing a story on their podcast and their prediction market trading as well. So we share your enthusiasm. We think they're a great bunch of guys.
Yeah, have dinner with the four of them sometime. That's an experience. These four comedians.
I can imagine.
It's great. I tip my hat to them. So I don't know what Mark was saying was the buy, except what you just told me. And sort of Johnson, of course, it's been a rocky road. This is the market of which next European leader is going to leave office, and we're all grateful that Johnson is well and recovering, of course. The pick that's interesting to me that Mark gave was Conti from Italy. He is there seems to be perpetual crisis around governance in Italy, and of course they've had a terribly high, big impact from the virus. Even in normal times, the government is often subject to change. So I think the one to watch is Italy, which is the worst hit in Europe by the virus. There's talk of economic collapse, but there's also Merkel has announced she's going to be leaving, but she may be around for a lot longer than people think. Right now she's trading at around 52 cents, which feels about right, that she'll be the next to leave, but we'll see.
That's an interesting comparison, because Merkel is leading in that market at 53 cents, as you said, down a penny on the day. Conti had a big move just today, up 7 cents on the day to 29 cents. And you look at these two leaders and you look at just from the exposure of the virus, of what's happened in Italy, yet Germany's done a relatively good job of containing infections throughout the country. And maybe that's being reflected somewhat in the pricing, whereas she should have been trading much higher because she said that she'd be leaving, and maybe there's some thought that she'll continue in office.
Right, and then Spain is interesting, right? Sanchez, what's going to happen there? He's trading at around 12 cents right now.
Yeah, 14 down a penny on the day.
Okay, so the top three are Merkel, Conti, and Sanchez, and Johnson, who had the spike up to 43, is now back down in a dime or 11 cents.
Well, it's an interesting market, and it's also had a good share of activity, almost 500,000 shares traded in that market already. So definitely one to watch. Let's move on to the next one. That's probably the one we speak about most frequently, and that's the 2020 Democratic VP market. Of course, Harris is on top right now at 31 cents, down a penny on the day, and Klobuchar is at 25, down 2 cents. Stacey Abrams getting a little bump today, up 4 cents at 12. And Whitmer off 2 cents today, trading at 10. So it's Harris, Klobuchar, Abrams, and Whitmer, which pretty much reflects what you're seeing over at Betfair. It's Harris and Whitmer. At Politico, it's Harris and Klobuchar. At CNN, it's Harris and Whitmer. The New York Times picks Abrams. What's your perspective on this market, and what do you think the criteria need to be for an effective VP selection from Biden?
Okay, so this is something I know a little bit about, having been involved in presidential campaigns for more than 30 years. Yeah, the first criteria in picking a VP is do no harm. At the end of the process, at the end of the day, as the election is looming, people do not vote for the VP. They vote for the man or woman at the top of the ticket. And so the most important thing to take away in terms of the people who are preparing these lists and vetting these candidates, they know that better to have a VP candidate who makes no waves than makes the wrong kind of statement or the wrong kind of waves. Now, these four that you mentioned, Harris, Klobuchar, Whitmer, and Abrams, these are tested products, which gets back to rule number one. You don't want to put somebody in the limelight if they're untested or unready for the kind of scrutiny that they're going to get, especially from the other side. Now, each of these candidates brings different assets to the ticket, having said that they're not going to cause a defection of voters. And it's interesting that Harris is at the top. And in the whole context here, there's some sentiment that Biden's commitment to nominating a woman was limited his options too soon. But be that as it may, that was a decision the campaign made. I'm certain they had their reasons for making that decision. And it's not surprising that Harris would be at the top. It's not like she's going to bring the state of California with her. The Democratic nominee is presumed to be winning the state of California anyway. But Harris has, demonstrated she's got, she comes to the fight with brass knuckles, and that may be an asset in the eyes of those who are sorting what the options are. Klobuchar is interesting. She's of course campaign tested, and she can arguably help deliver, a couple of states, Wisconsin, maybe Michigan. It's a narrow Trump win, and Minnesota, which was a narrow Trump loss. Whitmer's interesting. Because she's popular at home, and she's shown a proclivity to push back against the president. But given what's going on in the state with coronavirus, it's, it may be difficult to depart for the campaign trail. I don't know.
I think you're echoing a concern that I would have just based on news reports out of that state today. She may not be checking that do no harm box. Perhaps she did overreach on the stay-at-home orders. That's certainly the feeling of some of the residents there. And you're seeing active protests today outside the Capitol. And maybe that becomes too controversial of a candidate.
So that's interesting. There's a microscope here, but most voters, unlike PredictIt traders and you and I, most voters pay very little attention to who the VP pick is going to be unless it turns out to have been a mistake. So, and there's even less attention than normal given where everybody else is focused on, which is, am I going to have a job next week? Am I going to have a parent or an in-law come down with the virus, and I'll have to, find some way to arrange for their care. So the VP pick, while it's fascinating to the PredictIt trader, is really not center stage right now. What that means is there are going to be shuffling of the deck. There may even be a new entry into the top ranks, and one of these candidates may take herself out of the running. But this is going to be a volatile market. You can make money on this market.
This is certainly the market of greatest interest right now because there's so much optionality and so many underlying possibilities. John, we were really thrilled to have you, and we hope to have you back because so many questions came in from different listeners and readers of Luckbox magazine where we speak about the prediction markets in every issue as well. And there's so much more we want to ask you, but for the sake of your time, we're going to save that for another segment. Congratulations on your new news about Coinbase. And we know things are going to get really hectic and exciting for you in the months leading up to November. So we will be tagging along. We hope you continue to listen in. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me on, guys.
We appreciate it. And to everyone out there, thank you for turning into The Political Trade. Be sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts so you can be the first to catch any trends and tactics and trades that are shared by our guests. And even go get your free subscription to Luckbox magazine at getluckbox.com. So this is Jeff Joseph.
And I'm Mike Reddy.
Remember to wash your hands and don't touch your face. Stay healthy and join us next week on The Political Trade.